Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Afterlife podcast. I'm Slash Sister Jen.
And I'm Slash Sister Hallie, and today we are going to be taking not a deep dive, but just a cursory examination of legacy sequels in horror film franchises. Obviously, worth noting, like more recent ones like Exorcist Believer and the Halloween franchise that we just got revitalized with the piss poor ends.
There's some good things about that trilogy, and there's some real shitty things about that trilogy as well.
Right. And we'll dive into that one on another episode where we talk about convoluted timelines. But right now, we're just going to be talking about legacy sequels. And I think, if anybody out there knows, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Psycho 2 is the first legacy sequel because it took place 22 years and was filmed 22 years after the events of Psycho. And they brought back Anthony Perkins and Vera Miles's characters. Both of them came back and reprised the same characters that they were playing. So,
right, and so just so everyone knows, so that we're all on the same page, what we mean by a legacy sequel is a sequel to an original horror film where they bring back a character. And most of the time, that character is played by the same actor. We do get some little differences later, where obviously I'm referencing Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, where they brought back Sally Hardesty, but she was not played by Marilyn Burns because Marilyn Burns had passed away before they filmed it.
And obviously, Gunnar Hansen did not play Leatherface in that either. But
it's not Gunnar Hansen was it's only Leatherface in the first one.
Right. But he did come back for a Texas Chainsaw film, the 2013 one. It's the only one he came back, and he was playing like the father figure of the family at that point.
Right. And he's really only in it for just a few minutes at the very beginning, like right sequence, as
that's it.
Right.
Which
as
again,
the Sawyer family is. Yeah, of course. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The funny thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that I don't think people talk about it nearly as much as they do Halloween as far as timelines go. Obviously, we're going to get into this when we deep dive into timelines. But I just don't think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre gets talked about nearly as much as Halloween does when it comes to the way things are twisted and weird. But yeah, I mean, as far as legacy sequels go, you're right. I'm pretty sure Psycho 2 is the first one that I can really think of where we get a returned character played by the same person that played him in the original film.
It's also interesting to note, too, I just picked up a book from Stacy's book rack. It's called Psychosanitarium. It's not written by Robert Bloch, but it's an in-between. So Robert Bloch wrote Psycho in 1959, and then he wrote Psycho 2 in 1982. Like literally a sequel to the book itself. And the movie they didn't like what he had done with the character in the book, so they made their own separate sequel. But the book that I bought last night, Psychosanitarium, dives into those 22 years that Norman Bates was locked up in the asylum, and he meets like his twin brother that was declared like deranged as a child and abandoned and all this other stuff. And but it's interesting that Robert Bloch.
That's really interesting because there is that. Right. That's really interesting because there is that whole, I mean, yeah, we pick up 22 years later. However, what happened in that 22 years that he was in the sanitarium? Can I borrow that book when you're done with it?
Absolutely. So yeah, Psycho 2, I think, is probably the first legacy sequel. Are we defining a legacy sequel as something that is 20 years or more? Or because like Dawn of the Dead technically is a legacy sequel too. It took 10 years to make Dawn of the Dead, 68 to 78.
True, but they don't bring any of the same characters back.
No, but Romero wanted to.
Right. Right.
Because the
Which would
entire
have been
thing
really
was supposed to
interesting.
be one coherent story.
Right.
And
right, for sure.
He wanted to bring those characters back, just like Tom Savini allegedly plays the same character from Day of the Dead in Land of the Dead.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, definitely. Then when you really look at it that way, I mean, definitely, I think Romero's intention was for it to be all in one. It is one universe.
No, it is. It is.
So yeah, I mean, especially when you're right, when you get into the later films where there are actually people that are carrying over into the next film. So yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. I mean, really, in a sense, you could say a lot of sequels to the original could be a legacy sequel, depending on how long. I think where we're talking legacy is that it's been X amount of time since that character has been part of the story. So yeah, so it's when you're bringing back a character. Obviously we have talked about Halloween's multiple timelines, but they have brought back Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode twice now.
In obviously timelines.
Correct. But yeah, so there's actually two different Laurie Strode legacy sequels.
Because
yeah, I mean, really, H20 is literally, it's exactly 20 years after the original, right?
Call it H20. I've always heard it called H2O.
I've always called it H2O, and then recently I've heard a couple people call it H20, which makes sense because it's Halloween 20. So, I mean, 20 years later, it's obviously not the 20th movie, but it is what it is. I mean, I don't know. I think you could really call it either way. But yeah, Halloween gets that reset multiple times with a legacy sequel. Was it to 20? Okay, so 1978 to 2018, it was 40 years. So it was 20 years and then another 20, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Halloween really, as far as legacy sequels go, really is setting the standard. Really, if you want to call it that way.
Honestly, it really is. Good, bad, or indifferent.
I mean, Halloween as a franchise, though, has been a standard setter for the horror genre, especially the slasher genre in general. So, I mean, let them carry on, right?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they try to carry that story forward with the Shape, Michael, whatever, being eviscerated.
Spoilers. Yeah, literally. Spoilers. If you're listening to this and you're listening to a podcast about horror legacy sequels, spoiler alerts don't need to be said. I don't think. I personally don't think.
You wouldn't think, but I mean, people be people.
Yeah, they sure do be. Now, I know you personally are a huge Ghostbusters fan. And definitely the most recent Ghostbuster movie is, like, I mean, you can go off about that because I think you definitely know more than I do as far as the legacy factor of that. But certainly,
I mean, so yeah, definitely Afterlife is by far a legacy sequel. It is almost 40 years after the events of the first Ghostbusters film. The first Ghostbusters was 84. Afterlife was 21. But yeah, they brought back Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Sigourney Weaver and Annie Potts. So we got 5 returning characters coming back for that.
Don't get mad at me. I know. Shame on me. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. But I've heard wonderful, amazing things, not just from you, but from other people as well. Not that you wouldn't be an unbiased person anyways. Obviously, you have your opinions about different parts of the Ghostbusters universe.
I'm assuming you're talking about the 2016 sequel that we not speak of?
No, that's why I didn't say it. It's like Voldemort. It must not be named.
So that movie, while it wasn't a legacy sequel, it did keep the franchise alive in the fans' minds. It was great in, like, the story was actually good for that. The execution of story, the overuse of special effects, specifically CG special effects, going massively over budget, and the fact that it felt like they were reaching through the screen, grabbing the audience and shaking them, saying, "Laugh at this. This is funny. Why aren't you laughing?" They missed the mark with that, in the aspect that, yes, okay, you had two SNL actors. Yeah, you had two SNL actors on the first Ghostbusters with Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, but they focused mostly on the aspect of the fact that it was three guys going into business for themselves, not trying to make it a funny movie, not trying to make it overtly funny, not trying to make it overtly science-based or overtly horror-based or whatever, however you want to look at that. They blended it beautifully, unlike the 2016 film.
Right.
And that's where I'm going to end with that.
Yep. No, I don't disagree with you. I think that initially that 2016 one caught a lot of hate, and I think the general consensus was that it was because it was women, and people were being like sexist by not liking it. But really, when you actually watch the film, it's just not that great.
It's not that great. I don't get why Dan Aykroyd.
I like some of the actors that are in it. I really like a lot of the actors that were in it. But that doesn't make a good movie just because you have good actors in the movie.
Right. I don't understand why the original actors thought that this was a good idea. I mean, it was a good idea to do the story. It was not a good idea the way it was executed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so you say I know about Ghostbusters, obviously.
I know it's coming.
Texas Chainsaw.
Okay, Texas Chainsaw. I thought you were going to bring up Scream, to be honest. We'll get there too.
We'll get there, but
yeah,
I think Texas Chainsaw Scream was first, wasn't it?
Scream. Scream was 2021.
We're calling it Scream 5. It's Scream 5.
Right. Call it what it is, for sure. I mean, so it was 2021. It was really only 10 years after Scream 4. However, 2011. I just looked it up.
I swear to God, it was 2010, but okay.
Yeah, I just looked it up. That's why. I mean, I don't know. Google says 2011, but you know how that is, because sometimes IMDb will have one date and Google will have another date, and it's all based on when it was premiered at a film festival or whatever. Right. So Google says 2011 though. Anyways, IMDb says 2011 as well. Yeah. So really, it was only 10 years from Scream 4 to Scream 2021. Scream 5. Let's just call it what it is, like you said.
Right. But I mean,
what's interesting about Scream? Yeah, what's interesting about Scream is that new reset with new characters and everything, it was still a legacy sequel because we still brought back the original trio. We had Dewey, we had Sydney, and we had Gail. And then we get our new cast of characters. What's interesting is then the following film, Scream 6, which was 2022, right? A year later. So Scream 6 comes out, and because of issues that, I mean, they originally wanted to have Sydney in the movie, but Neve Campbell, I don't think it was that she wanted too much money. It's that they didn't want to pay her what she was worth.
She was willing to pay.
Exactly. They were not going to pay her what she was worth. And she put her foot down. And I think they quickly realized that they made a mistake. But it is what it is.
Massive mistake.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with Scream 7. I know it's in the works.
Well, and now we have Jenna Ortega and oh God, what the hell is her name?
God, of course you would make me go blank on that one. Geez, Melissa Barrera. Sorry.
Thank you. I keep wanting to
Melissa
call her
Barrera.
Sam Barrera because her name's Samantha Carpenter in
Because
the
her name's
film.
Sam in the movie. Right.
Right. But no, they're both out. They're both out. So,
and it'll be interesting to see how they write them out of the story without them even being in it at all. So
body doubles killed.
Yep. I know you and I have talked about this on many occasions. It could be a very interesting legacy sequel if they brought back Stu Macher. And I know you have a theory for how it would work, and I agree with your theory for how it would work. I would love to see the return of Stu.
I will die on this hill that they need to bring
I'll die with you.
A true legacy sequel, and they should have done it with 6 after the events of 5, with everything like the culmination of the film literally being in his house.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Like 6, my idea for 6 would have been perfect, and I guarantee it would have been fan service to the nth degree. Because God forbid we live in Hollywood and we can make these pitches to Hollywood execs. No, we live in Central Illinois.
Yeah. Instead, what we got was Scream 5 and Scream 6 both having a ghost Billy that's grown up. They didn't do a very good de-aging on him. He looks like a damn adult. It's bad.
He looks like a 40-year-old.
There's parts about that. I know. There's parts about both 5 and 6 that I do not like, but there's also things that I really love about those movies as well. I do like
the fact that they do go meta with it, and they actually call what it is. They call it a requel. It's not like it's not like a retelling of the story, but it's a sequel, but it's kind of retelling the story. And we get another requel in that aspect with Candyman.
Yes. Yeah. Candyman. If there was one.
Candyman is a legacy sequel. It's a requel in an aspect because it's a retelling of the story, rebranding it, but it's a continuation in the same instance. Because they bring back Vanessa Williams.
Yeah, and I don't think, me personally, I was not expecting that at all. At all. Until he's literally like in his mom's apartment, and I'm like, oh my God. He's literally the baby from the first movie. Like that, if there is one franchise that has done a legacy sequel very cleverly and in a way that is very hidden without it being super obvious, one in the trailers, and like when it's a legacy sequel, they tend to make it like really well known, like, oh, this person is coming back, or this character is coming back.
In the trailers for it, though, you very distinctly hear Tony Todd's voice say, "I hear you've been looking for me," and we don't get that in the film at all.
No,
not at all.
No, the only voice we get from Tony Todd is the very, very end. It's pretty computer generated as well because it's like superimposed over Anthony's face, and he says, tell everyone, or make sure you tell my story, or basically that's all we really get from Tony Todd in that one. So yes, we do get the returning character of Daniel Robitaille, but we also get the returning character of Anthony himself. And what's his mom's name? Ruby May?
Played by Vanessa Williams, but not the musician, different Vanessa Williams.
Right.
We also do get Virginia Madsen returning as Helen Lyle with new dialogue recorded.
Right.
It's not used in the original. She's not on screen, but her voice is heard.
Yeah. I really, really love the way that Candyman did that. I have some issues with the way that the movie, with the whole of the movie. And really more just kind of with the way that they ended it. But really, like, I love that they tied it into this whole hive. They made the story more than what, like, they expanded on what was already there and made it better and made the original story better in the long run, if you ask me, I think. That's my personal opinion on Candyman. But yeah, like, Candyman is an example of a really, really, really good,
well thought out, planned out. But I mean, you got to look at the mind behind that, Jordan Peele.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Jordan Peele knows what the fuck he's doing with horror.
Yes, he does. And he knows how to spin and craft a really, really cool story. You know, I mean, not just in what he's done. I mean, and really, you look at all of his films, everything that he has had his fingers on, all have really good storytelling. And I think
I'll be honest, I
that
haven't
is
watched anything that's not horror related from Jordan Peele. I haven't watched like Keanu or anything like that, but
right. Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of the he did the Apple TV Twilight Zone remake.
Paramount
Right?
Plus. Yeah.
Was it Paramount Plus? Okay. I can't remember because I streamed it illegally. Anyways. No, I watched at least the first season. I'm not sure if they continued on. I know they didn't do a ton of episodes, but
they did 2 seasons. It got canceled.
Okay, so maybe I know I maybe I did watch the whole of it so far. I don't know. I'd have to go back and check, but yeah, at least what I saw of it, and I know he didn't have his hand in every single episode, but like, you know, he was the producer. He knew. I mean, he was
the narrator for it too,
yeah,
though, too.
right, so. Right, yeah. And so, I mean, he still had his hands in every single episode, even if he wasn't directing, or, you know, he still had some kind of influence in the episodes too. I really liked what they did with it. It didn't really take off, but it is what it is. But I personally really like anthology horror. I love it. I love it. You know. That's another podcast episode we could do, is anthology horror, because there's plenty of those out there that we could talk about. There's some good ones out there too.
Definitely.
But bringing it back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because you did bring that up to me. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though having definitely some restarts, requels, the timeline is very back and forth. You know, we kind of go, like, if you look at the first 4, which I'll classify those as the first 4 before the reboot of 2003. So you've got like the first 4.
We're looking at like 1, 2.
So 1 and 2, Leatherface, and
Next Generation.
Yeah.
Next Generation? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you look at those first 4, really, the only thing tying them all together is Leatherface.
Yep.
Well, the story changes.
1 and 2
1
did
and 2,
have,
yeah. Yeah, you do have Drayton Sawyer, who is in both the first and the second. And obviously that character is still there, and you know, that the third one is just fine. It's whatever. It's just a Leatherface story. It's just a slasher. They basically, by the third one, they're really turning Leatherface into a slasher. And by the fourth one, he's super a slasher. He's literally just like the killer for the family. You know, it's like, send in Leatherface.
He's the killer for the Illuminati.
Yeah.
What? What?
Man, that fourth movie.
The Illuminati is controlling Leatherface? What the
They controlling the whole Sawyer family, baby.
I mean, we did get very early performances in that out of Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger.
For sure.
And
for sure.
Honestly, those two were the best.
And in the third one, we get a very young Viggo Mortensen, too.
Yeah, that's true.
I think a lot of people forget about Viggo Mortensen having been in Leatherface. It was one of his first films, for sure. Mm-hmm. Like, it was definitely early in his career. But yeah, so then we have the restart, the reboot. That was a redo of.
It was.
of the original. I like what they did with that. That's something we can get into more with when we talk about timelines. But we get that whole section, which is what, 3 movies? We get Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, and then I think Leatherface is supposed to be a prequel to
the original.
The beginning. Right.
The original.
Oh, it's supposed to be a prequel to the original. Okay. Not a prequel to the Arlie Ermy ones, which is what I'll call those two.
Right.
Anyways, yeah. So we get those two, and then that Leatherface prequel, which
we get those two. Then we get Texas Chainsaw, which was a direct continuation to the original, so it bypasses everything else. Then we get the Leatherface prequel.
Right. Because that 2013 one, that one was 3D, right?
They had it in
originally,
3D.
Or at least in the theater, it was in 3D.
3D. Yeah.
Right. Which honestly, I think we've talked about this before, how 3D can really hurt a film because they're trying so hard to make the 3D part of it work. Whereas I think when I watched...
I didn't watch that in 3D at all, and I didn't see any 3D effects in that.
So that's what I was going to say, is that the Texas Chainsaw 2013, the only part that like really obviously was like trying to be 3D is when she throws the chainsaw to him. Like when she throws the chainsaw to Leatherface and says, "Do your thing, cuz," or whatever it is, that stupid ass line that she says in the movie. But yeah, so that one's kind of on its own. Again, a legacy sequel though, because they keep bringing Leatherface back. Leatherface is the main thing, but the true, in my opinion, the true legacy sequel for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
abysmal 2022 abysmal.
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That Netflix nonsense that, like, there was some cool things that I actually did like about that movie. There was a few things that I was like, all right, I like that. I think that Leatherface was pretty goddamn brutal in that one. I'll give him that. He got a lot of kills because of that bus scene.
He did. But I don't...
The way that they handled Sally Hardisty's character. If you want to talk about legacy sequels, okay, so we talked about how Candyman is the epitome of the way to do it. If there's a wrong way to do it, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What they did to Sally Hardesty was awful. For one thing, they bring her back mostly in just story in the beginning of the film, where they're like, oh, she's been chasing after him for forever. They kind of like show her like processing an animal or something, like for like a split second, but they don't actually bring her back until like 20 minutes before the end of the movie. She's in it for 2 minutes and Leatherface fucking kills her. Like immediately, just... she's not even doesn't have a chance. And it's like really?
50 years she's been preparing for this and he just fucking murks her like that? No, fuck that.
Yep. Sorry, but that I mean, if there was anything that made me mad about that movie, it was what they did to Sally. Sally survived one. Like, what an awful thing to survive. To be the sole survivor of that first film. You know, like of that whole first situation. But then they bring her back and she's supposed to be this badass who was like a sheriff or whatever, like a sheriff's deputy or something. I'm like, you know,
something like that.
Yeah, something. I don't remember what it was, but she's like spent 50 years looking for him. And literally he takes his chainsaw, buries it in her stomach and lifts her up off the ground. Like,
that would have been like if they brought like Lori back in 2018 and killed her off like instantly.
Immediately.
I'm glad they didn't. In
Me too.
2018. I think,
but they did such a disservice to Sally.
Agreed.
Whereas
it's egregious.
I think what they did in Halloween 2018 is they brought Lori back as a fucking badass who stayed a badass through the entire trilogy. And
until ends.
Yeah.
Then she's Susie Homemaker.
Yeah. Yeah. Halloween Ends is just bad in general.
I mean, they took everything that they had established in 2018 and Kills, and it was like out the window. Everything. The rules
Michael
that they
always comes home, right?
Yes.
Michael always comes home. He doesn't hide in a fucking sewer for 5 years.
Yeah, I'm looking at you. Whoever. Fuck, I can't even think of
David Gordon Green.
Thank you.
You forget his name all the time. It's okay. We don't really need to think about him. I hope he kind of just like fades into weirdness at some point and stops trying to do things to movies that don't need things done, because he's the reason that Exorcist Believer came along too, and that was
Exorcist Believer, in my opinion, is an okay film for setting up additional stories.
But I think it didn't do well enough for them to actually warrant having additional stories. Now, I did hear
David Gordon Green was signed on to do a 3-picture deal.
Right,
And after
but he's
the
not anymore.
performance of Exorcist Believer, he was fired. Mike Flanagan has been brought on, who has done Midnight Mass, the Haunting of Hill House, the Haunting of Blythe Manor, the Fall of the House of Usher, Dr. fucking Sleep, which is another
one.
sequel.
Yep. For those of you who are not watching us on YouTube, Jenny was just freaking out about Mike Flanagan, like doing a little fangirl moment, hands over her face, like, Mike Flanagan. Yes. We love Mike Flanagan on this channel.
And he's going to be helming. I think he's going to be writing, maybe directing the next 2 Exorcist movies.
Right.
So I'm excited to see where the franchise
I'm on board.
Yep. I mean, I was on board at the very end of Believer when we got Linda Blair coming back for even like the 30 fucking seconds that she was in it.
What, like 5 seconds when she's just like, "Hi, Mom." Basically that's all we get from her, but she was there.
But you want to talk about legacy sequels? That was 50 years. 50 fucking years in between Exorcist 1 to Exorcist Believer. That's gotta be the longest.
Don't forget about Exorcist 2, The Heretic, though, because that shit did happen.
Ellen Burstyn wasn't in that.
No, but Reagan was in it. Sorry, excuse me, folks. I had COVID a couple of weeks ago. I had that bad stuff a couple of weeks ago. And the cough just will not go away.
As we told you on our YouTube channel, she was hanging out with David Draymond too much and got down with that sickness.
I did. I got down with the sickness. Bitches, hold on, I'm gonna cough again. Okay.
You okay? You good? You okay?
You okay? You okay? That's what I'm supposed to ask, Hallie. That's my line. You okay?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd flip the script on you, okay? But yeah, okay, so we just mentioned Dr. Sleep.
Yes.
Technically a legacy sequel.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As far as bringing back characters, there was nobody that was any actors that carried over, right?
No, because everybody either was too old or passed away.
Deceased.
Or,
yeah.
I mean,
I don't remember what's the girl's name that they got to play the Wendy character, because she was fantastic. And she looked, I don't know if they did any kind of prosthetics or anything like that on her, but
the only type of prosthetics they did was they had Henry Thomas shave his head and they put a wig on him for Jack, playing Jack. But that was the only prosthetics that they did.
Okay. So, I mean, the girl, okay, let me see here. What's her name? Sorry, I'm trying to find it real quick here. I have it pulled up on my computer. But yeah, is that who it was?
Alexandra Esso.
Okay.
Yeah, she played Wendy Torrance in that.
Okay. Yeah, there she is. Okay, yeah, she was in that movie Starry Eyes. Did you ever see that movie?
Mm-mm. I know
Holy
of
crap,
it.
you
I've
should
just
watch
never
that.
seen it.
It's true. You want to talk about body horror? That's a body horror right there. You should watch that sometime. Anyways, yeah, she was fantastic as Wendy. Like I was almost like taken out a little bit by like the fact that that she did such a great rendition of Wendy Torrance. Yeah, I don't know. There was, you know, you know. Shelley Duvall had reason to have some very interesting performances in the original film. However, I think we all know that she was not treated well by Stanley Kubrick. Um, but yeah, it is very interesting to see. Obviously, uh, there's two completely different books. So you've got The Shining and you've got Doctor Sleep that are totally different books that are obviously sequels to each other. But even the book Doctor Sleep came out how many years after The Shining? Like quite
Years.
a while, right?
Yeah,
Like didn't
I
Doctor
think
Sleep just come out within the last 10 years, right?
I think that Doctor Sleep was actually only out like the book Doctor Sleep was only actually out for about 2 or 3 years before they made the movie.
Before they made the movie.
Yeah, and the movie came out in 2019.
Yeah, 2019.
I was gonna say I
Yeah,
was
I've got
working at
pulled up.
Family Video,
So
so it was 5
yeah,
years ago at least.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I
Family
mean
Video.
it's interesting. I'm sure there's probably more legacy sequels that I'm just like not thinking about right off the top of my head.
The only other
Um
one that I can think of that's horror related is, well, two actually, is Prey and Hellraiser, both off of
okay.
Hulu.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Oh, okay, technically Alien Romulus too, as well. Technically,
Technically. Yeah.
they
Yeah, I
brought
guess
back.
technically because it does go back into the original timeline.
It goes back into the original timeline, which honestly, it's they bounce around in it, but it's still one timeline. They have never like reset it or anything like that. But they do bring back Ian Holm, who has tragically passed away, but they bring him back and digitally put his face on a body double that apparently doesn't look all that great. And he's playing another droid in that series of what he played at the character he played Ash in the original Alien. He's not playing Ash in Romulus, but he's playing another droid in that series.
Gotcha.
So technically, it's a legacy sequel. Technically,
Right. Another one that's pretty new, but glaringly obvious is Beetlejuice.
not
It's
horror.
it's not horror fully.
No,
Fully. It's
it's like
definitely got some
horror
horror
adjacent.
elements to
I
it.
mean,
Yeah, it's definitely horror adjacent.
It's Tim
Yeah,
Burton, and Tim Burton, while he has horror influences, puts more of a comedic spin on everything than the horror aspects of it.
and makes it friendly enough for kids to enjoy, even if it's a little bit horrific for them. Like Olive,
With the
my
exception
daughter.
of Sweeney Todd.
I mean,
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
no doubt whatsoever. Obviously, we get pretty much all the returning characters.
With the exception of Jeffrey Jones for obvious reasons. For those of you that don't know, he was caught up in child pornography and blacklisted by Hollywood. So
Yeah, rightfully so. However, maybe I won't say it. It might be a spoiler.
probably better not then.
Yeah, I better not. Just watch the movie because it's good. They don't ignore the character. Obviously, I mean, they show his funeral in the trailers. So,
right. I mean,
they don't ignore the character.
And I'm disappointed that didn't come back, and I understand why they didn't come back, but I'm curious to, and I think they like work it, like they figured out like some type of loophole is the Maitlands got out of the fucking house. You know, and that's like the whole thing about spirits is that they're tied to the fucking house. Like they couldn't leave the house because they'd end up on Saturn with the sandworms.
Right.
So
yeah, they do talk about it, about the Maitlands. I mean, they're definitely
they would have to because it was their fucking house.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so I mean, that's obviously the most recent Legacy sequel that I can think of, because that, as of recording right now, just came out 4 days ago. So yeah, or 5 days ago. It was out on the 6th. Today's the 11th.
Because they start showing them on the night before they're actually out.
So like 6 days, like a week ago. Okay. Been out for like a week. But yeah, that's probably the most recent one that I can really think of. I'm super excited to see where they take Legacy sequels in the future.
But here's the thing: are Legacy sequels warranted still? You know, are they adding anything to the existing stories that predated them? Or are they just doing it as a cash grab to bring in more fans to a franchise that sometimes may be better off left to die? You know?
Yeah. I don't disagree with you on that.
You're going to disagree? Okay.
I don't disagree with you.
Oh, okay.
I don't disagree with you on that. I think there's definitely some cash grab parts. There's definitely people, I think, at least inside of the Scream universe, for me, I think Radio Silence, who has been in charge of doing the last couple of films, are doing it because they do love the series and they love the franchise, and they're doing it out of pure love. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's been a lot of cash grabs.
Oh, no. Specifically the 22.
Yeah.
Abysmal for sure. Piece of crap. And apparently they're making another sequel to it.
That's what I've heard.
Let it go.
Okay, so all I heard, though, was that there is going to be something new within the franchise. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily a sequel to what they did in 2022.
No, it's not necessarily a sequel to what they did in 2022, but it's still a sequel in the series nonetheless, where it's like supposed to be taking place in like some gated community or whatever, and like the Sawyer's house just happens to be next to this gated community. That's what I've read online thus far. Fuck off with all that shit. Just
I can't like it.
Right off. No.
I want to love it. I want to love every part of my favorite franchises.
No, I get that. I want to love what they're going to do with the Friday the 13th franchise, if and when that ever fucking happens. The series, I think, is fucking dumb, but continue the story of Jason in some capacity. You know, I think that the general populace wants more Jason Voorhees, not Pamela or young Jason, which is what this series is supposed to be. It's supposed to be Jason as a kid or whatever.
Okay, so can I just bring something up really quick that I guess is not technically a Legacy sequel, but really, really technically is? Because Ash makes his tiny little cameo for a half a second when he turns to the camera and says groovy at the end of Evil Dead 2013. Also, Evil Dead Rise, his voice is in it, and according to the director, Lee Cronin, that it is actually Ash's voice.
That it's actually Ash, that he's gone back in time because, and we talked about this in our Evil Dead review, that Lee Cronin approached Sam Raimi and said, look, you took one, Fede Alvarez took another Necronomicon. I want to take the third one, and we're going to make this like a thing. You know, this is a new mythology. There's 3 different Necronomicons. Which, I mean, they did establish in Army of Darkness that there were 3 Necronomicons, so.
And really, at any point, they could go back to any of those Necronomicons for a new part of the story.
Absolutely, because we clearly cannot fucking destroy them. We can't destroy them. We can't even stop the goddamn Deadite infestation. So, yeah.
We still haven't figured it out. Ash never even figured that shit out in 3 seasons of
later. 40 years later.
So yeah, I mean, really, if there's any series that could continue to have legacy after legacy after legacy, Evil Dead could do it.
Evil Dead can do it because you don't have to have the same set of characters in it.
Right.
They could make a cameo
really,
or whatever.
The legacy could be the Necronomicon in general.
Honestly, yeah. Absolutely.
So,
definitely.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there for one last thing because, like, we already talked about my other 2 franchises that I love so much. We talked about Texas Chainsaw. We talked about Scream. I figure we might as well throw in there that Evil Dead technically is the legacy sequel, if we really want to look at it that way.
Technically.
Yeah.
I mean,
I just like to get off on technicalities.
Yeah, well, whatever. We didn't get to talk about that much about Hellraiser or Prey, which definitely are legacy sequels in an aspect.
True. Again, the thing about Hellraiser is that it's not necessarily a character, although Pinhead is carried through the entire series. But it is the box.
Yeah, well, the box.
It's the box.
Which, I mean, if that's the case, Necronomicon.
Box. Necronomicon, box, same thing, right?
The chainsaw is family.
I guess that could be what's carrying through. Really, like, let's talk about that for a second, because really we've got a lot of weapons and objects that carry the legacy through to all the sequels for sure. God, we could go into objects in horror films. That's another topic we should go on.
Yeah,
I think we might have just come up with a new episode.
Let's end this right here. But the next episode that we are going to be talking about, we've alluded to it very much in this episode, is the convoluted timeline of horror franchises, specifically Halloween and Texas Chainsaw, because those are the ones that are the most fucked up. Leprechaun's also up there too. Leprechaun's up there too. But
man. There's actually quite a few really messed up timelines that I never really realized until I really started thinking about it. That I'm like, God damn, that's fucked up.
Right. But we'll get into that on our next episode, where we have Brian Emmerich, one of our Slashaholic
a long-time friend of mine. I've known that man for over 25 years. We go way back. So I'm excited to pick his brain. He is a big Halloween fan. So it'll be really, really fun to have him on for this, because he is a big fan of Halloween, and he will have, I'm sure, a lot to say about the nice convoluted timelines of the Halloween franchise for sure.
Fucking convoluted. So convoluted.
There's a lot to say.
There really is. There really is. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this has been The Afterlife, and we will see you there.
Thank you very much for joining us.